The small, run-down house stood quietly in the corner of the street. The windows, once clear, were now clouded with dust, and the door creaked when it opened. Inside, the boy sat on a worn-out chair, his eyes glued to the cracked television screen. His hands trembled slightly as he clutched a ragged book, the only possession that still seemed valuable to him. His life was far from easy. For years, he had been an invisible figure in the neighborhood, a boy from a poor family, struggling to make ends meet. It wasn't that he didn't try, but life seemed to slam doors in his face at every turn. He had long since learned to keep his head down, to endure the mockery that came from those around him. The rich kids at school, with their shiny cars and perfect clothes, always laughed at him, calling him names and pointing out his worn shoes. The adults weren't any better, they'd look past him, never offering a second glance. But today, something was different. The boy sat by the window, watching the world go by, when a sudden roar of an engine shattered the silence. His heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just any car. It was a luxury car, gleaming, polished, a sight so rare on this street that the boy thought he must have imagined it. The car slowed down, its engine purring as it came to a stop right in front of his house. The boy's mind raced. Who would drive a car like that here? No one in the neighborhood could afford such a thing. He rushed to the door, his pulse quickening, and peeked through the small crack. The car's windows were tinted, and he couldn't see inside. But something about it felt familiar. His instinct screamed at him that this wasn't just a random visit. There was something more to it. The car door opened, and a figure stepped out. The boy's breath caught in his throat. He didn't recognize the person at first, but the figure's calm, confident demeanor seemed out of place in this humble neighborhood. The stranger walked up to the front door with purpose, and before the boy could react, a knock echoed through the house. The sound sent a chill down his spine. He had no idea who this person was or why they had come, but he felt an overwhelming sense of both curiosity and fear. The knock seemed to shake the very foundation of his world. His hands were sweaty as he approached the door. For a moment, he hesitated. What if it was a mistake? What if the stranger was just looking for someone else? But then he thought about how little had changed in his life for so long. Maybe, just maybe, this was his moment. This moment could be the beginning of something bigger. Something he couldn't even imagine yet. Taking a deep breath, he opened the door. The stranger stood there, a warm but unreadable expression on their face. "Hello," the stranger said. "I believe you're the one I've been looking for." The boy's heart raced. The question hung in the air, what was this person doing at his doorstep? And why did they think they were looking for him? This was no ordinary visit, and the boy was about to find out just how much his life was about to change. The door was open now, and there was no turning back. The journey that lay ahead would reveal truths the boy never thought possible. But for now, he could only stand there, staring at the stranger, wondering what the next words would be. And as the stranger stepped inside, the boy could feel his life shift in ways he hadn't yet begun to understand. Days passed, but the boy couldn't shake the image of the luxury car, nor could he forget the stranger who had knocked on his door. His mind replayed the moment over and over again. Who was this person? What did they want? And why did they seem so certain that they had come to find him? But life quickly pulled him back into its harsh grip. The next day, he walked to school, his old sneakers making a soft squeak on the pavement. He kept his head down, avoiding the stares of the other kids. Their laughter echoed in his ears as they pointed at his worn-out clothes. Some of them whispered to each other, clearly mocking him behind his back. "Look at him," one of them sneered. "Can you believe that kid still wears those shoes?" The boy's cheeks burned, but he kept walking. He had learned long ago that there was no point in trying to fight back. No one cared about his struggles. His classmates lived in a world so different from his, a world where money and power determined everything. The rich kids flaunted their latest gadgets, their expensive shoes, their shiny cars. And the boy was just invisible. Inside the classroom, the mocking continued. He sat in the back row, unnoticed and ignored. But even the teacher, who never seemed to have time for him, looked past him as if he wasn't even there. The boy's hands gripped the edges of his desk, trying to concentrate, but the whispers and giggles behind him made it impossible. He couldn't escape the feeling that the world was built for people who had more. More money, more status, more everything. People like him, people with nothing, were always left behind, struggling to survive. At lunch, he found a quiet corner of the schoolyard, eating his sandwich alone. He didn't mind the solitude. It was easier than facing the mockery of the other kids. But as he took a bite, a familiar voice cut through his thoughts. "Hey, loser." It was one of the rich kids, laughing with his friends. They were all standing in a group, watching him like a spectator at a show. "Is that all you can afford? A sad little sandwich? You really think you belong here with us?" The boy's stomach churned, but he didn't respond. He didn't know how to fight back. Words never seemed to work. He had learned that it was better to keep quiet, to let it pass. But as the group continued to laugh, something inside him stirred, a quiet frustration, a deep-seated anger that had been simmering for years. He wanted to scream, to lash out, to show them that he was more than they thought. But all he did was sit there, silently chewing his sandwich, wondering if anyone would ever see him for who he truly was. Later that evening, as he walked home, he saw the familiar, luxurious car parked in front of his house again. The same car that had appeared at his doorstep just a few days ago. His heart skipped a beat. What was this person doing here again? Why were they still interested in him? As he approached the door, he noticed the figure standing beside the car, waiting. It was the stranger. They turned toward him, their face unreadable, but there was something different in their eyes now. Something that made the boy feel like he wasn't invisible for once. "I'm here for you," the stranger said simply, as if they had been waiting for this moment all along. The boy blinked, still unsure of what to say. He had questions, so many questions, but all he could do was stare at the stranger, feeling the weight of the past few days pressing down on him. The mockery, the loneliness, the endless struggle, it was all so overwhelming. But this moment, this encounter, felt different. It felt like a chance, a turning point in his life. Something he had been waiting for, even if he didn't fully understand it yet. And for the first time, he allowed himself to hope. The stranger didn't move as the boy stood frozen in the doorway, unsure of what to do or say. The sound of distant laughter from the neighborhood felt muffled as his attention focused solely on the figure before him. The luxury car gleamed in the fading light of the evening, its pristine surface almost mocking the boy's humble surroundings. "I know this must be overwhelming," the stranger spoke calmly, breaking the silence. "But I'm not here to harm you. I'm here to offer you a chance." The boy blinked, still unsure. Was this some sort of joke? The neighborhood didn't see people like this, people with money and influence. They were never here. They didn't belong in his world. And yet, this person was standing right in front of him, saying things that didn't make sense. "Why would you want to help me?" the boy asked, his voice barely above a whisper, unsure if he was even supposed to ask that question. His mind raced with confusion. He had never been a part of anything beyond survival. He had never been offered anything but mockery, rejection, and scorn. So why now? The stranger's eyes softened, and for a moment, the boy thought he saw a flicker of something familiar, a glimmer of understanding, perhaps. "Because I see potential in you. Potential that most people overlook." The words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning, but the boy didn't fully grasp them. "What do you mean?" The stranger smiled, not in a way that felt condescending, but in a way that suggested there was much more to the story than the boy had yet realized. "I can give you the opportunity to change your life. I know the world you live in. The world that looks at you like you're invisible. But that's not who you are. You have more to offer than they realize. The boy felt a twinge of hope, something he hadn't felt in years. The stranger's words were like a light in the darkness, a beacon that promised something better than what he had always known. But at the same time, doubts gnawed at him. Was this just another empty promise? Another cruel joke played on someone who had never known anything but hardship? What do you want in return? The boy finally asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. He didn't trust easily, not anymore. Life had taught him that. The stranger's gaze never wavered. Nothing, at least not yet. I simply want to offer you a chance to prove to yourself what you're capable of. You can stay where you are, or you can take a risk. What you do with the opportunity is up to you. The boy was silent for a moment, his heart racing with uncertainty. He had never been given a choice like this before. His life had always been dictated by circumstances, by what others thought of him, by the cruel hands of fate. But this was different. This was a possibility. As the boy looked at the stranger, he realized something he had never allowed himself to believe: maybe he could have a future. Maybe he wasn't destined to be stuck in the cycle of poverty and mockery forever. The thought was so foreign, so impossible, that he almost couldn't accept it. But the stranger's words had planted a seed, and that seed was beginning to grow, despite his doubts. For the first time, he felt like there was something more to life than the hand he had been dealt. And as the stranger turned to leave, the boy felt a strange pull inside him, an urge to follow, to step into the unknown and see where it led. You're making a mistake if you don't take this chance, the stranger said, glancing back over their shoulder with a look that seemed to hold a promise. The boy took a deep breath. He didn't know what the future held, but something inside him urged him to take the first step. I'll think about it, the boy said, his voice barely a whisper. But deep down, he knew that this was no ordinary decision. This was the beginning of something he couldn't yet understand, but something that could change his life forever. As the stranger drove off, the boy stood there, staring at the car disappearing into the distance. His heart pounded in his chest, unsure of what to do next. But for the first time in a long time, he felt something more than despair. He felt hope. The boy spent the next few days in a whirlwind of confusion and anticipation. He couldn't stop thinking about the stranger's words, replaying them in his mind like a broken record. You have more to offer than they realize. What did that even mean? Was it possible? Could he really have a future beyond the mockery, beyond the life he had always known? The days dragged on, but the thought of the stranger and the mysterious offer never left his mind. He went through the motions, school, chores, trying to ignore the mocking stares and snickers, but inside, something was changing. A quiet restlessness grew in him, urging him to take action. Could he trust the stranger? Could he believe in something better? One afternoon, as he walked home from school, he found himself standing at the same spot where the luxury car had once parked. The spot was empty now, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. The streets were eerily quiet, and the weight of the decision pressed heavily on his chest. As he stood there, lost in thought, a familiar sound broke the silence, the roar of an engine. The boy turned around, his heart skipping a beat as he saw the sleek, black luxury car pulling up again, this time stopping right in front of him. His breath caught in his throat. The stranger was here again. The boy's legs felt like they were made of stone as he walked toward the car. This time, he didn't hesitate. He knew that this was a moment he couldn't let slip by. This wasn't just a random visit, it was something more. The car window rolled down, and the stranger looked out at him with that same unreadable expression. But this time, there was something else in their eyes, something deeper. Something that made the boy feel like he was being seen for the first time in his life. Get in, the stranger said, their voice calm but firm. It's time for you to understand what's really going on. The boy hesitated for a moment, uncertainty creeping in. But then, he remembered the words that had been planted in his mind. You have more to offer than they realize. He had been waiting for a chance like this, hadn't he? A chance to escape the life he had always known. A chance to prove that he was more than just the poor kid in the neighborhood. Without another word, he opened the door and slipped into the car. The interior was everything he had imagined, luxurious, sleek, and polished. The smell of leather filled his senses, and for a brief moment, he felt out of place, like he didn't belong here. But the stranger's presence beside him felt oddly comforting, as if they were guiding him through something unknown, something he wasn't ready for but needed to experience. The car drove through the streets, leaving the neighborhood behind. The boy watched as the familiar, run-down buildings faded into the distance, replaced by towering skyscrapers and shiny businesses. Everything looked so different, so foreign to him. His eyes widened in awe as they passed by lavish homes, manicured lawns, and streets that gleamed with wealth. "Where are we going?" the boy asked, his voice trembling slightly. The stranger turned toward him, a faint smile on their lips. "We're going to show you the life you've been missing out on. To see what's possible when you're given the right tools to succeed." The boy's heart raced. Was this really happening? Was this just a dream? He had spent his whole life in a world of struggle and poverty, and now, here he was, sitting in the passenger seat of a luxury car, headed somewhere he couldn't even imagine. As the car turned onto a new street, the boy's breath caught in his throat. The building in front of them was massive, a skyscraper that seemed to touch the clouds. It was made of glass and steel, gleaming in the sunlight. The boy's eyes widened in disbelief. "This," the stranger said, as they parked the car, "is where your new life begins." The boy stepped out of the car, his legs shaky as he looked up at the towering structure. He couldn't believe his eyes. This was more than he had ever dreamed of. More than he had ever imagined could be within his reach. And yet, here he was, standing at the doorstep of a world that seemed impossible just days ago. "What's next?" the boy asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The stranger turned to him, their gaze steady and filled with purpose. "Now, it's time for you to prove that you belong here. That you can rise above everything they've told you. It's time to show them who you really are." The boy's heart pounded in his chest as he followed the stranger into the building. He didn't know what awaited him, but one thing was clear, his life was about to change forever. He had stepped into a world that was completely different from the one he had known. And though it was uncertain, it was also a world full of possibilities. The boy had always dreamed of something more, but he had never dared to hope it could be real. Now, he was about to find out just how far he could go. As they entered the towering building, the boy's senses were overwhelmed by the polished floors, the faint scent of expensive perfume, and the quiet hum of activity around him. It was nothing like the old neighborhood. The people here dressed in sharp suits and tailored dresses, moving quickly with purpose, their eyes focused on tasks the boy couldn't even begin to comprehend. He followed the stranger through a grand lobby, past elevators that gleamed with chrome, and into a room that looked like something out of a dream. Glass walls overlooked the entire city, offering a breathtaking view of the skyline. A long desk stood at the center of the room, where several people were busy at computers, talking on phones, and organizing papers. The stranger led the boy to a small office tucked away in the corner. It was empty, save for a desk, a few chairs, and a large window that offered a stunning view of the city below. "Sit," the stranger instructed, gesturing to the chair across from the desk. The boy hesitated for a moment before sitting down, his mind racing. He couldn't understand how he had gotten here, how he had gone from sitting in a dilapidated house to being surrounded by wealth and luxury. This place, this world, it all felt so distant, like something he had only ever seen in movies. Yet here he was, in the heart of it. The stranger sat across from him, watching him closely. "You may be wondering why you're here. Why I chose you. The boy nodded slowly, still trying to process everything that had happened in such a short time. I don't understand, he admitted, his voice quiet. The stranger leaned forward, their eyes never leaving the boy's. You've been overlooked your entire life, right? Mocked, rejected, ignored because of your background. But let me tell you something important, that doesn't define you. You are not just the sum of your circumstances. You are capable of far more than anyone has ever given you credit for. The boy swallowed hard. His hands clenched into fists on his lap. But, how do you know that? What makes you think I have anything to offer? The stranger's lips curled into a slight smile. Because I was once in your shoes. I was once overlooked too, written off because of where I came from. But then I realized something crucial. The world doesn't change unless you decide to make it change. You have the power to shape your own destiny. You just need to see that power within yourself. The words hit him harder than anything he had heard before. He had spent so many years feeling small, believing that his life would always be defined by poverty and the way people saw him. But here, in this room, in this city, it felt like the world was opening up in a way he never thought possible. The stranger stood up, walking toward the window. The boy watched as they looked out over the city, their figure framed by the sunlight streaming in. Everything I have, everything I've built, came from believing in myself when no one else did, the stranger continued, turning back toward the boy. And now, it's your turn. I'm giving you a chance to take that first step. To stop letting the world define you and start defining yourself. The boy felt a knot in his stomach. He had always dreamed of something more, but he had never imagined that it could happen. Not like this. Not in a place so different from everything he knew. He wanted to believe it, but fear gnawed at him. What if he failed? What if he wasn't good enough? The stranger seemed to sense his hesitation and walked over, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. You don't need to have all the answers right now. But what I'm offering you is simple. A chance to prove that you can be more than what you were told you could be. A chance to show the world that there's power in believing in yourself. For the first time in a long time, the boy felt something stirring inside him. Something beyond fear. Something that felt like hope. What do I have to do? The boy asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The stranger smiled. You take the first step. You decide to walk down a different path. No one else can do this for you. But I'll be here to guide you. And just like that, the boy understood. This was his moment. His opportunity to change everything. All it would take was the courage to take that first step, and to believe that he could make it. As he stood up from the chair, the weight of the decision settled over him, but for the first time in his life, the weight didn't feel like a burden. It felt like the beginning of something important. Something that could finally lift him out of the shadows of his past. The stranger led him out of the office, and as they walked toward the elevator, the boy couldn't help but glance back at the city stretching out before him. For the first time, he saw it not as a distant dream but as a place where he could have a future. A future that was his to build. And with each step he took, he felt the power of that future begin to unfold. This was the turning point he had been waiting for. And now, it was time to see just how far he could go. The elevator doors closed with a soft chime, and the boy's heart began to race again. He hadn't expected to feel so nervous, so exposed. This wasn't just a new environment, it was a whole new world. Everything about the building, the people, and the stranger's words felt surreal, as though he was stepping into a dream, but unsure whether it would vanish when he woke up. The elevator descended smoothly, the glass walls offering a view of the city below. As they reached the ground floor, the boy's anxiety grew. What was waiting for him outside? What had he just committed to? The stranger had spoken with such certainty, and for the first time in his life, the boy wasn't being treated like an invisible, insignificant person. When the elevator doors opened, the boy was greeted by a young woman who was standing by the reception area, typing away on a sleek, silver laptop. She didn't seem surprised to see them, nor did she acknowledge the boy in any special way. It was as if this was a regular part of the stranger's routine. The boy felt both intimidated and amazed. This was a world he had only ever seen on television or in stories, an efficient, fast-moving world where people didn't hesitate or second-guess themselves. "Take him upstairs," the stranger instructed the woman without looking back. "Of course," the woman replied coolly, gesturing for the boy to follow her. The boy hesitated for just a moment, looking back at the stranger. "Don't worry," the stranger said with a reassuring smile. "Everything you need is right in front of you now." The boy nodded, though he didn't fully understand what that meant. He followed the woman to another set of elevators, the sleek metallic doors sliding open with an almost imperceptible sound. As they ascended, the woman didn't speak, and the boy was left alone with his thoughts. "Here we are," she said, her tone not unfriendly but distant. She led him into a spacious office with walls lined with bookshelves filled with books he had never heard of, and a large desk at the center of the room. Behind the desk was a man, a tall, well-dressed figure who looked at him with sharp, calculating eyes. The boy's breath caught in his throat. He had never seen anyone quite like this man. His presence was powerful, almost intimidating. The stranger from before had mentioned something about showing the boy what he was capable of, but the moment the boy stepped into the room, he felt like a small fish in an ocean of sharks. "Sit," the man said, motioning to the chair across from his desk. The boy hesitated again, his legs feeling heavy as he made his way to the chair. He could feel the weight of the man's gaze on him, and it made him feel both small and important at the same time. "I've heard a lot about you," the man began. His voice was smooth, controlled. "They say you're nothing. Just a poor kid from the wrong side of the tracks. But what if I told you that there's more to you than meets the eye?" The boy's throat went dry. He didn't know how to respond. His mind was a whirlwind of questions. How could this man know anything about him? What did he want from him? The man leaned forward, his eyes locked on the boy's. "You see, the world is full of people who are born with nothing. People who are dismissed because they don't fit the mold of success. But those are the people who can surprise you. They're the ones who can change everything. I've been where you are." The boy blinked, unsure of what to make of the words. You were like me?" The man's lips curled into a slight smile. "Yes. I didn't start in a place like this. I wasn't born with wealth or influence. But I learned how to create my own opportunities. And now, I'm going to show you how to do the same." The boy's heart skipped a beat. Could this really be true? Was it possible for someone like him, someone who had always been told he would never amount to anything, to actually rise above his circumstances? The words the man spoke held a certain power, a kind of promise that tugged at something deep inside him. But there was still a voice of doubt in his head, telling him that this was all just too good to be true. "I know what you're thinking," the man said, as if reading the boy's mind. "You're wondering if this is some kind of trick. If I'm just offering you false hope. But let me tell you this, I'm not here to hand you success on a silver platter. What I'm offering you is something much more valuable. I'm offering you the chance to work harder than you've ever worked before. To push yourself beyond the limits you've known your entire life. To be someone who stands out, not because of where they come from, but because of what they can achieve." The boy's chest tightened. Could he really do it? Could he rise above the mockery, the doubts, and the years of believing he wasn't enough? The idea felt overwhelming, yet something inside him stirred, a flicker of belief, a spark of possibility. The man leaned back in his chair, eyes gleaming with something almost predatory. "This is your chance. The question is, are you willing to take it?" The boy's breath caught in his throat. The room seemed to close in on him as the weight of the question settled in his chest. Was he ready? Could he really step into a life so different from everything he had known? He swallowed hard, his voice shaking as he finally spoke. "I'm ready." The man's smile widened. "Good. Then welcome to your new life." And just like that, the boy realized that everything he had ever dreamed of, the possibility of a future, was no longer out of reach. It was here, in this room, waiting for him to take the first step. And for the first time, he truly believed that he could. The boy had made his choice. The journey had begun. Days turned into weeks, and the boy threw himself into this new world with a mix of fear and determination. The transition wasn't easy. Every task felt like an uphill battle. He was surrounded by people who were far more skilled, far more experienced than he was. They moved with ease, making decisions that seemed impossible to him. Yet, each day he worked harder, absorbing everything he could, learning from the people who had already succeeded, and struggling through the doubts that still whispered in his mind. There were moments when he felt like giving up. When the pressure of trying to fit into this world, a world so foreign to him, seemed too much to bear. He missed the simplicity of his old life, the comfort of knowing exactly what to expect. Here, everything was uncertain. Every move was critical. Every step had consequences. But there were also moments of triumph, small victories that slowly began to build his confidence. He was learning things about himself that he never knew existed, the grit, the resilience, the ability to push through when everything seemed impossible. And with each challenge, the boy began to realize that he wasn't just surviving anymore, he was growing. One afternoon, as he sat in a meeting with the man who had first believed in him, the boy noticed something important. The man was watching him closely, a small but approving smile playing at the corners of his lips. "You've come a long way," the man said, his voice steady but filled with a sense of pride. "You've learned more in the past few weeks than most people learn in a lifetime." The boy looked at him, unsure of what to say. He had always been afraid of failing, afraid that he wasn't good enough. But now, hearing the words from the person who had pushed him to this point, something clicked. He wasn't just trying to prove something to others. He was proving something to himself. "You were right," the boy said quietly, almost to himself. "I didn't believe I could do this. I didn't believe that people like me were meant for this kind of life. But now, I see that I can. I really can." The man nodded, his expression serious. "That's the key. Believing in yourself when no one else does. And knowing that the road ahead will be difficult, but the reward is worth it. You have to trust that the steps you take, no matter how small they seem, are leading you to something bigger." The boy looked out the window, taking in the city below. He had once seen it as a distant, unreachable dream, a world that wasn't meant for people like him. But now, it felt like a world full of opportunity. A world where he could carve out his own place, where he could write his own story. "It's not just about the car, or the money, or the fancy things," the boy said, his voice gaining strength. "It's about what I can do with my life. What I can give back." The man's eyes softened, and he leaned back in his chair. "Exactly. It's about what you can do with the power you've earned. It's about creating something bigger than yourself, something that will make the world see that people like you, people who are told they can't, can." For the first time, the boy felt the weight of those words. He wasn't just a poor kid from a rundown neighborhood anymore. He wasn't defined by where he came from or what others had said about him. He was defined by what he was becoming. And with each new step, with each new challenge, he was becoming someone who would change the world in ways he had never imagined. As the days went by, the boy continued to learn, to grow, to rise above the limits others had placed on him. He worked harder than he ever had before, not just to prove something to those around him, but to prove something to himself. He had finally understood the lesson that the stranger, the man, and this whole experience had taught him. No one is defined by where they start, only by where they're willing to go. And when the boy looked back at how far he had come, from the mockery and the small house to the towering skyscrapers and the powerful life he was now living, he knew that this was just the beginning. The boy had not just stepped into a new world, he had built a new future. And it was a future full of possibility, of hope, and of endless opportunities. And as the boy stood at the edge of the city, looking out over everything he had achieved, he realized that the true reward wasn't in the wealth or the luxury, it was in the strength to rise, to believe in himself, and to show the world that he could be more than anyone ever expected.